Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Direct Edition. I'm your host, Dave. This is my podcast voice, and now you will listen to me introduce the podcast. This podcast is about whatever I feel like. Just kidding. It's about me. Come on. West Coast Davengers doesn't deviate. Welcome back to another episode and another week. I'm your host, Dave. This is Direct Edition. This is my podcast about whatever I want it to be because I'm a fucking boss, man. I'm my own boss. Isn't that a beautiful thing? I saw a friend last weekend who I hadn't seen since before the pandemic, or maybe right into the pandemic. So it's been somewhere around 3 or 4 years. She buys jewelry collections, silver mostly, cleans them up, repurposes them, whatever, and resells them at local vintage markets and online. It was really great to see her. I mean, I spent like an hour hanging out with her behind her booth, and we just kind of talked about going forward with our lives without working for somebody and being our own boss and doing these things for ourselves, whether it's a struggle or not, no matter how hard or easy it is. It's really nice to be able to wake up every morning and be like, you know what? I'm going to create the day how I want it to be. I'm going to push forward and try and make some sales, or I'm just going to hang out and come up with ideas of new things to do. One of those things that I've come up with, it's happening this year, but it's not the first time. That's Davenger Con. And last year, I did my first ever online Davenger Con, and then followed it up with the winter version, which was just 1 day versus 2. But the idea of Davenger Con was to take what I've learned with the YouTube channel, the friends that I've made, and the customer base I have, and give everybody a great weekend to just hang out, watch the stream for as long or as little as they want, opportunity to buy comics and stuff from not just me, but friends, and then have a panel or two where it's not about selling, it's about interviewing or doing a live drawing or something. And last year, the first ever Davenger Con was great. I mean, it had its little hitches here and there, and its focus was a little scattered, but I was able to raise a bunch of money for charity because I did a very big charity raffle, and that's 2 charities that I support. We had some great sellers on, and people bought some great things from these sellers. As well, I had 2 guests. One was a guest that I had never interacted with before, which was Jim Rugg from Cartoonist Kayfabe, and he's a comic creator and a great one at that. And then my buddy Joe Benitez. And, there was, like I said, little hiccups here and there, but nothing tremendously bad. I got to flex the comedy muscles too. And then in the winter, I did a 1-day version of this, which was just selling, and also a charity raffle. And that went off great too. Both Davenger Cons for me was very financially successful. And I think it was for everybody else. Now, in that, I needed to I wanted to change it up. And I wanted to give an experience that was more like going to a comic convention where you can, listen to people talk about comics from the professional standpoint, and also just some uniqueness. So this year it's happening, and it's happening on 420 weekend, it's just a fun weekend to do it. If you partake and you just want to get high and, sit on the couch or whatever and watch the stream for 2 days, then go for it. But we're cutting back on the sellers because And this is something that's super personal to me. This is not based off anybody. But the way I do things, the way I run my business, and this is kind of one of these things you learn as you grow a small business, is that I have a certain pace of the way I do things. I'm punctual as fuck. I'm also punk as fuck, but I'm punctual as fuck. When I'm selling or engaging with somebody, I like to keep the engagement high. I want people to not switch off. In this world that we live in, like even with this podcast, if you're bored for 30 seconds, then that's it. You're done. You're like, your brain's gonna be like, all right, I got to move on to something else that's going to keep me engaged. I'm not even a veteran content creator, but I understand it from every standpoint. I'm an entertainer by nature. And, even in a business sense, when I used to work for the company that did live and silent auctions, you just have to make sure that everybody is focused on what you're trying to get them to focus on. So on my channel, I don't want to have people on that aren't quick, that aren't engaging, whether it's with me or with the audience. And that's just because it's a reflection of how I want my audience to feel. So for Davenger Con, I don't want people watching me, for the first 90 minutes, and then somebody comes on as a seller and they're like, oh, this person showed 2 items in 15 or 20 minutes. I don't want to watch this. I'll just wait until Dave comes back on, which that works in my favor, but I'm not putting this on just to stroke my fucking ego. That's not who I am. I'm here to prop up people I care about and then give a voice to creators or whatever that are, promoting their books or comic book stores, whatever it is. I want to be a megaphone for people because not everybody has this avenue. And, and with that, I just have to say no to some people. That's all. It sucks. I'm a nice guy. I like to include people. But once again, if you build up something and you're super proud of it, you can't cheapen it by boring people with it. And so we're going to have, I already have at least Jim Rugg confirmed to come back. Jim Mahfood said he would come as long as his schedule lines up. And then I'm going to ask a couple other people. But the turn in this is to have 4 sellers. It's going to be me and Maddie and Manu and Japan Book Hunter, Sean. Sean's going to add this completely different flavor to the con because he is based in Tokyo. He sells rare manga. He is a YouTuber. He is, he is no slouch. He knows how to move things. He knows how to talk about things, and he's very engaging. So I'm really excited for the selling portion. And then I'm going to try and have every artist that comes on do some portion or piece of a live drawing, and I'm going to pay them for it, for whatever their commission rate is. And then that's going to be part of the raffle. So the 2 charities, it's Tiny Changes and the Laidler Music Money Scholarship Foundation. And so one is to fostering great ideas to kids and young adults that struggle with mental health problems in Scotland, because that charity was founded after my friend Scott's memory. And then Bryce, he does a scholarship at his daughter's high school that goes to, I think it's 1, it might be 2 children that are going into music programs in college. And you've listened to this podcast, you know me, you know how big I am into music. Bryce is a musician himself. And so, sure, there's plenty of causes in this world that can use money. I try and find ones that are a little bit smaller so that the money goes a longer way. And after working in the nonprofit field for so long, I unfortunately know some things about some of these bigger charities that the money doesn't really go where it's supposed to. And so you want to support the charities that do more grassroots stuff. And with everything going on in the world, I don't have the mental capacity to start spreading out to so many different charities. And I was talking to my friend and I was just saying, it's like these ideas come to you. And my idea for Davenger Con, I mean, I think I might have said it as like a joke, like I'm going to do this thing. And then I said it like 3 or 4 times. And when you put those words out there and you manifest things and then you put your head down and you start to think about how to pull it off and it becomes a reality, it's something else. And I have to give the biggest fucking shout out in the world to Joe Scar, who does all my design work for the channel, all my thumbnails. And he's a real creative force for me. He is going to be pretty much co-producing this with me. We've already gotten the logo. He's doing graphics for it. He's going to be here during both days. He's going to stay over and he's going to produce it. So I have to really put my head down in the next couple weeks and film some content and like things so I can take little breaks. But I'm really excited for it. And it's a passion project for me because honestly, like, sure, I will make a butt ton of money that weekend selling books. I will also raise a fuck ton of money for charity, which is the ultimate goal. But beyond that, because it is my job, so I do have to make money, I really would like this space to exist for people. I am not the social butterfly that I used to be. COVID changed everything, just like it did for everybody in different ways. And I just don't see the need to be out all the time anymore. And so in that, I understand what it's like to be an introvert or a hermit or, just a homebody. And I want to provide this opportunity for people to not leave their homes, but still have that experience of going to a con or something like that. So, and it's funny because I just went last weekend. I went to Emerald City Comic Con for the first time in a couple years. And it's the first time I've been to the new convention center. And it was easy for me. It was like stepping back in, it was like riding a bicycle again. But 2 days of it, I was exhausted. I can't imagine going to, as an attendee, I can't imagine going to a Comic-Con for 4 straight days. As a vendor, I can, because as much as it's a lot of work and you have to talk to a lot of people and you have to be quote unquote on, you do have the safety of being behind the table and you can take breaks. You can just, if you have somebody working the booth, you can just kind of like sit down for a couple minutes. Plus, and I can't speak for anybody that exhibits, but I get energized when I am working a table. I do not get super energized when I'm walking around for 8 hours, 2 days in a row, spending money. Although I do enjoy spending money and giving it directly to the artist. And, it was great. I mean, I have my complaints about Emerald City Comic Con altogether. It should be called Pop Culture Con because it's like not a lot of comics. The new convention center is really nice. So I dig that. Yeah, I was able to pick up some great art. I bought some of pages from Becky Cloonan. I bought a piece of art from Tulalote that I'd been eyeing for a while. It's a piece of a original poster or a private poster she did for the movie Heat. And it's a image. It's like a very famous image of Robert De Niro from that movie. I bought a original piece from Stan Sakai, which was really nice. And it's always great meeting him again. He's such a friendly human being and such a creative amazing creative person. I spoke with Chip Zdarsky, Derek Kirk Kim. I got to see Buddy Wayshak. Wayshak ended up giving me his extra pass for 2 days. So shout out to Wayshak. Who's never going to listen to this? If you're going to a Comic-Con that size and you're going for 4 days and you live in Seattle, it's going to be a little bit cheaper. But if you don't, I don't even know how much a 4-day pass is, but I got to imagine it's somewhere between $200 and $300. Parking down there, if you know the right lot to park at, still going to pay like $20 to $30 a day. Food, all this stuff. You're talking $500 for one person driving from outside of Seattle to Emerald City Comic Con and going all 4 days. Now, if you're a vendor, multiply that probably by 5. And, if you're going to somewhere like San Diego, which, let's be honest, most of the people that go to San Diego do not live in San Diego. So you're spending a couple $1,000 just to go to San Diego Comic Con. And it's great. You get to do all this stuff in person. But not everybody wants that. So that's where the idea of Davenger Con came from. And who knows? I'm talking about this. It's 2024. Maybe by 2027, it's a small con. And it's like, like a pure Comic Con. None of this pop culture stuff. And it stays small because I don't really need to get big. If my business model for myself works for me the way it does now, if it works that same way for a con, I don't ever have to get it big. I don't worry that I'm not going to make money when I do my sales anymore. I mean, who knows? The world could change. The world is a giant ball of fuck right now, but it always is, right? I feel like since 9/11, the world has been a ball of fuck perpetually. I like to use quotes sometimes, song lyrics, and to quote my buddy Kevin Devine in a song called No History, which is about 9/11. This is the future, severe and always happening. It just feels that way these days. And speaking of Kevin's going to be a future guest on the podcast. I actually was just down in Portland. I went to go see him play at Mississippi Studios and celebrated my 10-year sober anniversary, seeing the musician that was very much helpful in giving me some great advice when I made the decision to get clean and go to rehab and all that. I'm honored to have Kevin whenever it happens as probably my first non-comic guest. We're going to talk about music. We're going to talk about songwriting. We'll probably dive into politics, being New Yorkers, and also both being very active or at least politically minded. And we could talk about small business ownership because what Kevin does, he has a Patreon that pretty much is his life, his business model these days, besides touring, because album sales don't exist for small, like checks from album sales for small musicians don't exist for indie musicians. They're very small. Streaming is garbage. It's all these corporations getting fucking hugely wealthy off of musicians. So his Patreon is the way that he really has a tight-knit income every month, and I'm part of that. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things and just, dive in maybe some New York Mets. And, he was a comics reader as a kid, and we have a lot of musical common grounds. That was really nice to see him. But yeah, I'm just really excited to move this podcast forward and talk to small business owners or, artists, musicians and stuff that are in charge of their day-to-day, as well as maybe, involving that collecting aspect. And my friend Evan, I'll probably get him on the podcast too. He's a big record collector, and so am I. So So where was I? Something about the world being on fire. Oh, no, I didn't promise, but I did say I wasn't going to dive too much into politics. But I don't think what I'm about to talk about is politically minded, as more as kind of common sense, day-to-day life, and also like the social aspect of being a human. But a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was like a month or so ago, I had posted a video on my YouTube that I shot over I shot in November, going to all of the comic stores I could go to in 2 days in Portland. It's one of my favorite cities. I lived there for about 9-10 months, and I like going back there, and I like hunting comics there. It's interesting when you get people's perspectives on parts of this country that most likely have never been there, have never lived there, don't know what it's like, and are just kind of looking at it from the outside in. You know, I had that view about 25 years ago, before I really started traveling places. You know, Texas was a bunch of rednecks and they're ruining the country, and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. You know, a lot about the South, because as a Northeasterner, the South gets, you know, a certain rap. I mean, some of it's deservedly, just like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut get it, and the Northwest. But until you experience those places and you meet people from those places, everything that you have a preconceived notion of, the place you're learning about it, it's whatever they want to tell you. And that brings me to the news. The news will make everything sensationalized. They will make everything sound horrific. And, you know, if you only watch the news, whether it's fucking Fox, CNN, NBC, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's scare tactics down the line. Some skew really fucking weird and really outlandish, to just giving you the one murder that happened in Detroit that was grisly, but no other murders happened that month. You know, whatever it is. You know, some people are like, oh, New York's the most dangerous place on earth. It's not. It's not. There are neighborhoods in every city that are absolutely dangerous, and you should not go into if you don't have to. I spent a lot of time I spent like a week in Baltimore when I was a kid, and I was in one neighborhood once, and I will never go back to that neighborhood, or at least at that point, I was just terrified. But that was when I was 14 and a stupid fucking suburban white kid that didn't know anything, you know? But Portland and the Northwest gets this rap in a post-COVID world because the news was showing and I'm using air quotes, the Antifa protest violence stuff during COVID. First off, most of that, if not all of that, was a response to fucking George Floyd's murder by the cops. And I'm sorry, but if you're listening to this and you're like, well, shut the fuck up, because he was murdered by the cops. He was murdered by a cop. And then everybody watched. So I go to Portland, I shoot this video, I post it. And, you know, a lot of comments, you know, some great comments too. People like, oh, I just moved to Portland. Thanks for introducing me to all these shops. To, you know, oh, somebody left a really cool comment that was like, I don't think Denver could stack up to Portland, but here's all the shops that I love in Denver. And that's the kind of shit I love to see. I love people sharing the same thing versus like the one dude from Chicago who was like, well, Chicago's got 30 shops here and there. And I'm like, and I just made a joke. It wasn't a pissing contest, but I made a joke. I was like, sure, but with traffic, it could take you 30 years to get all the shops. And that, he was like, well, I make my own schedule, so that doesn't matter to me. I'm like, this is why you can't talk to anybody via text that you don't know, because if you understood the context of what I was saying, it was a joke, even though it was mostly true, because Chicago traffic is atrocious. But, anyway, that's not what I would telling the story about. One person replies and puts a comment, Portland, ? Isn't that the home of the Antifa scum? And I'm just like, and I replied because I hate people that just, they look at the news and then they shut it off and they're like, yep, I know what's going on. I've been informed. There's nothing else to see here. And so I replied with Antifa stands for anti-fascist. So does that mean you're pro-fascist with a ? Because I will come back with the most snide, fucking sarcastic remark. If you're putting a comment in my YouTube video, that means you are ready to play. And I play hard. Anyway, his reply was, jackass. I didn't reply to that because I'm just like, yeah, I said what I wanted to say. And then I was looking at the video again while I was in Portland, and I noticed a comment that I didn't notice from a couple months ago. And it said, what a shithole. That's all it said, which is kind of funny because like you would have thought that YouTube would have blocked that comment. But I guess I don't know how the algorithm works. Maybe because shithole is one word is not a offensive word. And so I saw it and I said, and I just replied this weekend, "You seem like fun!" ! It's just like, you imagine you watch somebody's video where it's like 30 minutes of them digging through comics, going, showing these comic stores, being real enthusiastic about it. And then somebody's just like, yeah, that's a shithole. So then he replied, "Have you seen the zombies?" And so in that, I did not reply because I don't want to engage with it anymore. But it just made me think about how people view certain cities because of the homeless problems or because of what the news tells you. Like if you drive around Portland, downtown Portland has become a ghost town because most big cities on the West Coast in a post-COVID world got hit really hard. And I remember I was in Portland last year, or maybe it was the first time post-COVID that I was there. And there are literal empty 14-story buildings there. Businesses just left. And a lot of that was due to the protests, I'm sure. And a lot of that was due to just general COVID. The economy and businesses pivoted. And, certain businesses were able to just, okay, we're not going to pay rent here anymore. Everybody's working from home and we'll figure it out later. And, companies had to do that to survive. I'm totally understandable. But in the Northwest, it got a bad rap because the protests were so long, so large. The cops, I was living on Capitol Hill during the beginning of COVID and after George Floyd was murdered. And the protests were in response to the brutality of the police. In the Seattle protests, because I was there, because I had friends that were there, because I was watching literal live streams as it was happening, I saw the police response to the protests of their brutality was met with more brutality. The mayor told them, "Oh, we're not going to mace anybody." They pepper sprayed everybody. So it was a bunch of bullshit. The media blew it out. People took that at face value when they watched the news. And that's not the case. And Portland is not a shithole. I think the east side of Portland is actually one of the nicest places in this country. And I loved it there. And I love going back there. And the city will recover in time. And when this person referred to zombies, my first thought was, and like I said, I just knew I shouldn't engage, so I didn't engage further. But I almost want to reply, you do realize those are human beings. I still struggle in a post-COVID world. And, this goes back even further because I've been alive. I've been alive and also learning on the regular for several wars. I have seen maybe it's just an American thing. And I don't know because I don't live anywhere else. But the lack of empathy for human life these days is staggeringly sad. And during COVID, with that fuckstick in charge, and basically hundreds of thousands of people died because people couldn't either tell the truth, agree, or just look out for their fellow neighbor. And I was a postal carrier during them. So I was seeing people all the time. And I was delivering mail in a neighborhood in Seattle called Magnolia, which was generally, or at least 50% or more retirees and older folks that have been living in, the Seattle area since, the Microsoft and Boeing booms, And so, yeah, just the sheer lack of empathy across the board that I would see on the news and on social media and it was sad. Look, I'm celebrating 10 years sober. I know that I'm a fortunate person that I was able to get the help that I needed. And I did have the secure job and money and health insurance to take care of the bills for rehab. I was not in a chemical addiction place. I did not have a drug addiction or anything like that. I just don't understand why people demonize this as if these people are doing something wrong to others. Now, look, I understand that within the homelessness situation and the addiction situation and the mental health crises, that crime is going to happen. People resort to crazy shit when they are not in the right place. We all have been there. We've all made fucking decisions out of necessity or like some type of fight or flight response. That doesn't absolve people of it. But is a broken car window the grounds for somebody to die on the street? Like, is people stealing food from the grocery store to eat so harsh that these people are above being treated like fucking humans? And I know it's not, if it happens to you, it's, like I've had friends that had cars broken into, houses broken into, stores broken into. It fucking sucks. It's terrible. But on the other side of it, it's okay that people are living on the street and you should demonize them. So, that's just kind of like how I felt when I saw that last comment, and I chose not to engage with it. Sorry if some of you are, if you already clicked off, then it doesn't really matter. I steer on the side of empathy because I've been down some interesting paths in my life, and I just look at a lot of things at face value when I see them with my own eyes. And, during COVID, like, there were parts of Seattle that look like fucking Dawn of the Dead. Does that mean that it's a shithole? No, that means that the city's not taking care of anybody. And the biggest problem I had with Seattle, he finally left, fuck him. But you had the richest man on the face of the planet, Jeff Bezos, that bought up most of the city, turned it into fucking Amazon town, basically like, gentrified the fuck out of the city in a way that I've like, the only thing that resembles it is Williamsburg, that area of Brooklyn, that gentrification that I've seen like that. But that was my biggest problem, is that this dude's in the city. He could employ and house pretty much everybody in the city working for him, and chooses to be the villain and wants to go to fucking space. Now, I know he doesn't have to do anything with his wealth, even though he's destroyed pretty much every small business that exists in this country. Anyway, world politics is not my forte, but these things that I see in these experiences that I have, at least I have an opinion and I have empathy for people. And I've been in some shitty fucking situations in my life, but thank God I've never had to be close to homeless. And so, I really feel for people like that. Most people do not choose to be addicted to drugs, living on the street, have schizophrenia unchecked, or bipolar disorder unchecked, or any type of mental illness unchecked. Generally, people want to be well. Generally. It is in our DNA to want to survive. Generally. And that's that. But I had a great time in Portland again. Went to Nostrana, had a great dinner, hung out with my friend Megan, got to see Kevin, got to see some other friends. And so that was fantastic. And I just felt like I needed to exercise a little bit of some of these things that I'm, holding in. 10 years of sobriety, and I can face my feelings and my, my thoughts a lot better than I ever could. So, and so I've got a lot of cool things down the pipeline. By the time you hear this, I assume this is probably going to be out maybe like a week from now or so. So when Mark Miller, or as you would call him by looking at his spelling of his name, Mark Millar, Scottish writer, The Ultimates, Old Man Logan, Civil War, then went and created his own Kick-Ass and Nemesis, all that stuff. He did a retailer chat last year. It was spurned on by this comic store owner, Glenn something, went viral screaming about comics these days. So Mark Miller's like, I'm going to be the comic savior, and I'm going to have a bunch of veteran retailers on my channel and ask them a bunch of questions. We're going to get to the bottom of saving comics. Heart was kind of in the right place. I like Mark Miller, but the thing is he's a big Twitter guy. And when you look at the things that he says on Twitter, when you look at the replies and you see the people that are egging him on when it comes to things that might be controversial or maybe just regular, but they turn controversial because the people that chime in are like just these mouth-breathing basement dweller fucks that are just like, they ooze the whole, Anyway, I just get bad vibes from reading some of the replies. And so he did this retailer chat, and I think he was trying to he's part of this vibe of older comics people, whether they're pros or collectors or readers, older than me, maybe 47 to 60 or whatever, that want comics to be like they were in the 80s, the Copper Age, the Late Bronze Age, when comics were great. And I'm just like, have you read most of that shit? Because it's not good. And it's just like the most generic superhero bullshit. You get into like the mid 80s to the 90s, and you get the Alan Moore, you get the Gaiman, you get these, Frank Miller, you get these great creators doing a little bit of everything. James O'Barr with The Crow. And so I like him. Once again, I appreciate his the way that he creates comics, but he seemed in this retailer thing to be kind of trying to push them in a direction of a narrative that he wanted to line up with what he's saying. There was some good stuff said in that. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of me saying, ever since I saw that, which was maybe last October, November, I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get 4 retailers that I know, or at least, know by proxy, stores that I've been in, and I'm going to get them on for a chat. And the only parameters I had were they have to do both new and back issues. They have to have a little, they have to have the ancillary items. I want well-rounded shops that do it all so that you can get the big picture. And so this coming Monday, so a couple days from when I'm recording this, I'm going to have Cape and Cowl Comics on. They won the Eisner Retailer Spirit Award. Comics Place Bellingham, which is a store that's been around and changed owners for like 40 years, because that was Eric Larson's shop when he lived there. Now or Never in San Diego, which is only a couple years old, but Aaron, who owns it, he became a pal. I went into that store last time I was in San Diego. I loved it. We've chatted a lot, so he's going to be on there. And then finally, Little Shop of Heroes, which is a store in Scotland that I found last year. They ended up getting nominated for the Eisner Award. They went to the San Diego Comic-Con last year, and they didn't win. I believe they lost to Cape and Cowl. So I'm going to be having all 4 of these shop owners on, which is actually going to be possibly 6 people, because 2 gentlemen own Comics Place and the couple owns Little Shop of Heroes. I don't know if both Albie and Lou will be on, but I'll find out. So I'm doing that Monday morning. I'm really excited to get some really nice viewpoints on owning a comic shop, the current comics market, but the back issues, the ancillary items, and just, what can we as collectors, customers, do to help comic shops even more than just going in and, like buying a book or whatever. So that I'm really excited for. I'm really proud that I was able to wrangle cross-continentally. Hopefully it actually goes off without a hitch. Then I just got confirmation today that I'm going to have an interview with Chip Zdarsky, who one of the most prolific comic book writers in the last 20 years, and Sex Criminals, which is the book that he created with Matt Fraction. And it was an Image Comics. It was one of my favorite comics ever. So I think that's celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, or maybe it was last year. So really excited. And then another one that I am partially put together. I don't know if it's actually going to fully happen, but next week, so like 6 days from today, I'm going to be interviewing Becky Cloonan and possibly as well Tula Lote together. They are the co-creators and the co-artists and co-writers of Somna, which is a distillery book that came out last year. It's a 3-issue magazine-sized book from Distillery, and it is erotic, supernatural folk horror. And it's a beautiful book. It is an R-rated book, so if you're not into it, but if the best thing about it is if you are a film fan and you are big into A24 movies, put out Moonlight, put out The Witch, put out Hereditary and Midsommar, then you'll dig Somna. It is that vibe. So Tula's in the UK, her real name's Lisa, and Becky's in Portland. So we're doing a morning interview, but she's like, there is a chance that Lisa just doesn't remember. So either way, I'm going to be interviewing Becky Cloonan. I'm fucking stoked on that because she's a creator I've been a fan of for 15 years or so. So big things down the pipeline. Just extra excited for this. I'll probably record another one or two before Davenger Con. Once again, that is April 20th, April 21st, 420. And I'm really excited for that. And then the only other thing we did, me, Manu, and Ryan RMS, we did a Marvel non-sport card sale on the channel last weekend. That was a lot of fun. Had a great time with the homies and sold some cards. And I was on a podcast on YouTube called Last Pack Magic. And Graydon wanted to interview me about comic cuts, which are cards where pieces of actual panels and comics are cut up, put onto a card, numbered, and, put into packs. And I'm just not a fan of them. And I said some controversial things. Some people didn't like it. A lot of people did. And that's me in a nutshell. I am not for everybody, but I'm for a lot of people. So you can check that out if you're into cards. Last Pack Magic on YouTube. And then me and Daryl If you don't follow Read Your Comics, this is one of those things where I love talking about comics. But on my channel, when I've tried to do it, we had great conversations, but the audience wasn't there. And I'll bring that back eventually, the book club. But Read Your Comics, Daryl has a great channel where that's what he does. He goes through top-down view of comic books. And so I was on recently, and we did 2 of the McFarlane Hulk issues, 336 and 337. But we just recorded Hulk 340. And I'm really excited for him to share that one. We talked about it for an hour. Here's the funny thing about it is, first time I ever made this mistake because I was recording the audio. I forgot to hit record. We talked about it for 45 minutes. And then we had to do it all over again. So when that comes out, follow Read Your Comics on YouTube. And then if you want to hear me and Daryl dissect and talk about and gush over Hulk 340, then there you go. Yeah, this has been an episode of just kind of like a little update, some feelings, some rants, and that's it. If you are not, for some reason, subscribed to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, please hit that subscribe button. It's also on YouTube. So if you're listening on YouTube, hit the like button. But even more so, the cops are coming. They heard me talking about fucking protests and stuff, and they're like, oh, we got to shut this one up. Sorry, guys. I don't like you. Another thing, if you were listening to this on Spotify, there is a star review system. If you scroll all the way up or whatever, there's a thing that says rate this podcast. Just give it a rating. If you're on Apple, please write a review. On the road to cross-platform 100 subscribers, which I think I'm really close. I think I'm somewhere in the 85 range. So, recommend this podcast to a friend. But the reviews do help. The star reviews do help. Whatever you can do to boost the signal of this. Once I hit 10 episodes, I think I'm going to start really promoting it. But I wanted to get 10 episodes down the pipeline and then maybe do like a live or, record a video just talking about the podcast and then post that as the promo. So, and, if you have anything to say, there were some things that I said in here that probably some of you were like, if you want to have a conversation, you can always DM me. They're my opinions. I'm not trying to offend anybody generally, personally. So anyway, I think that'll be it for maybe what is my last political/non-political episode of Direct Edition. I hope you enjoyed this. And, if you have anything, like I said, anything you want to say, you could always DM me. Or there's, I think like on Spotify, there's a little you can make a comment thing. But anyway, you keep reading comics. Keep coming back. I'll keep talking about shit. And I don't fucking know. I don't know how to end these fucking things. So I'll just hit stop.
I actually tried to hit stop and it didn't work.